This is a lecture about Art Nouveau in France. Primarily, you have to understand this as a reaction against the Industrial Revolution. They're definitely inspired by William Morris, and what they want is to make the urban environment more beautiful. Art Nouveau literally means new art, so it just was seen as being this very modern, vibrant style. There's also this desire to create a universal style that could be applied in any situation and thereby unify urban life. So let's think about what's happening before this period. What are they pushing back against? This is a photograph of London in 1877 showing a hoarding. This is where you would get tons of posters. And designers looked at these posters and said they're ugly and they just fill up the space and they make the urban environment disruptive. An example of this is the Siege of Troy poster that we spent so much time talking about last week. This is just seen as having all these different fonts and this giant illustration, and it's really hard to know where to rest your eye, and these designers felt deeply frustrated with it. So why does it happen in France, though? So in 1870, the French lost to Prussia in the Franco-Prussian War, and they lost badly, like immediately. And so there's this deep introspection after that as like, what is happening? Why have we lost this war? We need to regain our traditional leadership somewhere. Let's do that in the arts. And so what we're going to look at in this lecture are the different influences that create Art Nouveau. One of them is the Rococo, which is a much earlier period in French art history. Japanese art is very influential as well, and we will talk about Jules Chéret and a little bit of Alphonse Mucha. The Rococo is a period from roughly 1700 to 1789 in France, and it's rooted in the aristocratic styles of Paris specifically. It begins when you have all of these aristocrats who had been living in Versailles and they move to Paris, they build themselves these city palaces, and they create this art to decorate those palaces. And what we're looking at here is an example. This is a salon in one of those city palaces. And you can see it encompasses every type of art. We have painting, sculpture, architecture. There's not a lot of furniture in this room, but typically it would have been full of furniture as well. The Rococo was wildly popular in the 18th century, starts in France and basically gets exported around the continent. So if France is feeling a little wounded in its pride, they're going to look back, when were we leaders in this? Now, we're particularly interested in how it relates to painting. So here I've just added a painting by Francois Boucher, The Rising of the Sun. In the center, we see the King of France disguised as Apollo, the sun god, and you can see that he's like right here, and everything about him is curving. Everything about this is like swirling around him. It's all pastel colors. This is really influential for Art Nouveau artists. The other person that's very influential is William Morris, because Morris is one of the first to criticize the city as being an unattractive place. Now, Morris's strategy was to look back at old book designs and old book producing practices and create objects like this, the nature of Gothic. Now, this is beautiful, it is, but it's not made using modern technologies. These artists in France, they want to achieve the aesthetic look of this type of art, but they want to do it using modern technologies. And I think that's why Art Nouveau takes off so much more than arts and crafts ever did. Okay, so what we're looking at here is a poster by Jules Chéret. It's for a performance at the Folies Bergère. The Folies Bergère was a cafe concert in Paris where you would go and eat your dinner and drink and watch performers on the stage. This is a show called the Fleur de Lotus, and we have in the center our dancer, scantily clad. It looks like she's actually coming out of her gown. But I want you to observe the way her body type is almost exactly like that Rococo painting we were looking at. Everything about this is turning, everything is pastels, all of these soft curving lines. The the typography, if you can call it that, this is all hand produced, right? So that kind of gets back to the William Morris as well, that you have this clear artist's hand. However, what's different about this, it is a color lithograph. Now, Chéret, he learned how to use chromolithography in London. And so when you think about Owen Jones, that type of lithography, that type of chromolithography was really influential for Chéret, and you see it playing out here. Here's another example, and you can start to see what the common strategies are. So again, we have this female figure. She's at the Palais des Glaces, that is an ice skating rink. So we have a woman enjoying urban life. She has red hair. She has this curving scarf coming down around her. We see her mid-motion. Everything is elongated. Very much an emphasis on verticality rather than horizontality. And you can see that this is a chromolithograph again, it's color lithography. And you can like literally see the different blocks that were used to create the colors from the deep blue here to the lighter blue and then the kind of wash underneath. It's not just posters though. This extends into everything. So there's a redesign of all of the metro stops. So this is an entrance to the subway. They redesign it using these same qualities. So if you look at the typography for the Metropolitan right there, it looks like it's hand drawn, right? And you see these organic curving shapes, everything about verticality. They do this across the entire city with the idea that everything is going to have this more unified, beautiful appearance. So you have these Art Nouveau posters exhibited, they're just hung up in the subway. All of this transforms the urban environment and people love it. So Chéret is the artist that we were talking about before, and he's really the leader of this. And part of that is because he has this brilliant marketing plan in which he is going to reprint his most famous posters. But not just him, many different artists who are associated with this movement, their posters are reprinted in a smaller format. I have another video that I want you to watch that will go through it in greater detail. But the idea is he calls these designers, he calls them masters of the poster. That is such a particular name for this, and it's on purpose, right? Because he's trying to argue, I am a master, I'm an artist. Like, I'm not just this like laborer who's created this. Rather, this is something that one can master, and I have done so. This spreads Art Nouveau culture because before, honestly, when these posters would go up, people would rip them down immediately and bring them home with them because they wanted to keep them for themselves. And so it became really hard to get one of these original full-size posters. Also, they were really big, and that wasn't always the easiest thing to display. These are smaller, and so they're more collectible. The other major influence is Japanese art, especially ukiyo-e. Ukiyo-e means floating world. It's a euphemism for scenes that are set in the Yoshiwara district of Tokyo. This is where there were theaters and prostitution. They primarily date from 1603 to 1867. This is a period in which Japan was completely isolated from the rest of the world. But beginning in 1868, Japanese art is displayed prominently at European world fairs, and people start to collect it, especially with the encouragement of this art dealer, Siegfried Bing, who really wants people to collect Japanese art. And what we're looking at here is his pavilion at one of the world's fairs, and you can see it says Art Nouveau and Bing right there. But Japanese art, especially this ukiyo-e art, is really appropriate in part because it celebrates some of the same things that these Art Nouveau posters celebrate. Like, as you'll see when you go through the reading, they are advertising performances, they're advertising women out by themselves, which is always a questionable thing in the 19th century, unfortunately. And so there's this parallel between the lifestyles depicted in the ukiyo-e prints and then what Art Nouveau is trying to depict. So here's an example of one. This is by the artist Utamaro, and this is a woodblock print. This is a portrait of a courtesan. Sometimes these are called bijinga. They're prints that feature idealized pictures of beautiful women, and this was his specialty. So this particular print, we see a woman, again, you see that verticality, right? She's like this tall column. She's disrobing herself, and you can see her taking off layers of her kimono. So this is one layer that's pulled around the ground, and then she's removing other layers. To help us work through some of these stylistic similarities, I'm placing the Utamaro print next to a poster by Alphonse Mucha called Gismonda. The story behind this poster is interesting. Gismonda was a play that was written specifically for Sarah Bernhardt, who was literally the most famous woman in the world at this point. She traveled all over the world performing. She owned her own theater. That's the Théâtre de la Renaissance, which you can see at the bottom. And she's really just the most famous person. So the story is Bernhardt comes to the poster maker on Christmas Eve, and nobody's there except for this like apprentice, Mucha, who is actually Czech. He's not French even. And he just happened to be there on Christmas Eve at the right moment, and he designs this poster on the spot for her, and she loves it. And so he becomes the person who's making all of these images of Bernhardt moving forward, which of course makes him super famous. Anyway, so let's look at the similarities between these two images and talk about why we say Japanese art, specifically these ukiyo-e prints, are so important for Art Nouveau artists. So first of all, these curvilinear lines. Now we saw that in the Rococo as well, but you look at the way the outline of this pooling kimono robe down here is at her feet. It's all curves. Similar over here, the way her gown drapes over the edge of this stage. That's a good example of these curvilinear organic lines. Flat patterns. So the woodblock print has a very two-dimensional quality in part because of the patterning on her gown. This has this very flat appearance. It doesn't look three-dimensional. You see a similar thing happening over here with this pattern on her gown, and then along here, and then on the stole draped over her shoulders. This is all a very flat pattern. And then finally, notice how everything has this thick outline, especially here on her hair. Something that's so lovely about Art Nouveau is the way this is carefully modeled, right? You see her chin has a shadow, and this looks three-dimensional. And then it's disrupted by this thick black line and then the flat orange of her hair. Bernhardt was famous for her strawberry blonde hair. It's very similar to the way this thick outline on her robe and then her arms. This is a very Japanese quality. So that's all I've got for our content lecture today. I'm looking forward to your responses in the discussion about these different styles and the other images that you'll bring in for it.